Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you today to present a paper on Kampung commoning towards new transdisciplinary activism. I'm very happy to listen to Ibu Laksmi's presentation as it connects into my paper. I would like to pick up her last statement that is very important, that commoning is a verb. But in my presentation, commoning has a little bit different meaning from what she has presented. In my presentation, commoning is not a verb or an action to make a commune, but to make commons. So what is the difference between a commune and commons? Well, I have a different reference. Going to the idea of commoning or commons, such as now we are familiar with digital commons, from Leonor Olstrom, Governing the Commons, written in 1990. She is reworking actually the concept or the idea that Gareth Hardin presented in his essay, The Tragedy of the Commons in 1968. But there is complete contradictory position between Hardin and Ostrom. So let us talk about what Hardin think about commons. Hardin has in his idea or imagination of commons as an open space which is unregulated and free for all to access. An example that he mentioned is, of course, the pastures in England. When there is a very large green pastures, which is open for everybody to use, especially for their herd of cows or sheep to grass in the pastures. According to Hardin, it is very difficult to keep the pastures as it is, as an open space for everybody. Why? Because according to him, individual can use the pasture in his or her own way that exceeds the sustainability of the open space. For example, if there is a large pastures and there are only 5 cows, then the pastures is fine. The grass will always grow again and again. But if one person have 100 cows and let it grass in the pasture, maybe the grass will be gone in a while and other people cannot use the pastures. That's why his title is A Tragedy of the Commons. According to him, it's not sustainable. The only way, according to him, is to let private sectors come and enclose the open space and use it with privatization, manage the pastures through privatization. So Hardin is, of course, more towards the right, and he believes in capitalism and all the tenets that goes with it. But actually, Hardin did not learn from direct experience of open space or commons. Leonor Olstrom instead went to other countries in South America and learned about the practices of the commons in different countries, and she introduced the idea completely differently. She said that open space should be regulated by the local people that has the right to access the open space. So it should be community-based management with some principles. There should be participation of the people who share the commons. There should be inclusive access, and there should be democratic forum to manage it. And in that way, commons are alive. And her idea is very much listened to by a lot of people. She won a Nobel Prize, and a lot of sea commons in different way, in different form, not only material commons, but also cultural commons as alternative to state and capital privatization. I will quote Kidwani and Bafiskar here that says, many current campaigns to resist incorporation into the widening circuits of capitalism are grounded in a shared commitment to keeping alive the commons and the collective practices around them that create and sustain community and its ecological base. I think ecological basis is the word ecological basis are very, very important here, right? And I will talk about this practice of creating commons or commoning in the context of Indonesia, and in my through my experience working with Kampung activism. So Kampung in this paper is either urban or rural. In urban area is informal settlement, and in rural area it can be in the form of desa or desa kota, right? A kampung is very different from a commune. Commune, as Ibu Laksmi has already explained, is a community of people who shared intention, ideology in order to live together and to build something together. But kampung is a community of place, right? Sometimes not by design. It evolved in the city, for example, as informal settlement around urban centers, and people came and then settled there. And you don't choose your neighbors, actually, sometimes, right? So it's not by design, not by ideological intention, mostly by chance. In rural area, of course, it's a network of kinship that has been there for a long time. Sometimes there is a history of it. It's not bound by, well, it is bound by class. Maybe it's lower middle class, but actually in reality, it's very heterogeneous. The backgrounds, the religion, the ethnicity, etc. Also ideologies. They might have completely different ideologies. So the act of commoning is not by intention, like what Bulaksmi's experience in the various commons, but it comes when there is urgency that necessitates the action. So now the question is, what is the condition that propels kampung commoning? Well, we will go to this present condition, which is the peak of global capitalism. We can say there is a direction towards hyper-urbanism. World's urban population by 2050 is predicted to be 50% to 68%. And in Asia and Africa, they said that some studies said that the regions would be populated and composed with the highest number of megacities. And 90% of the population would be urban population, right? In November 2018, Indonesia launched 100 Smart Cities program to enhance urban quality life. Now the question is, what is the future of kampungs? Meaning the urban informal settlement, which is marginalized from the hyper-urban centers, or the rural villages back there. Now, from students here who are from literature, linguistics, you can talk about the diverse meaning of kampung. Yeah, kampung has so many meanings, and we have to actually have a working definition. It can refer to rural village, urban informal settlement, and all the desa kota, etc. Kampung refers to a community unit with a specific sort of a characteristic or or sense of place, but not an administrative unit, because we have our administrative unit is not Kampung, but our administrative unit here is RT, RW, or Dusun, or Desa, right? But Kampung has many connotations. If you hear Kampung and you listen to all the songs about Kampung, it's about nostalgia. There is a sort of a place of origin. Like you say Kampung Halaman or Pulang Kampung. But at the same time, there is also the term Kampungan, which means backward or underdogs or outdated, or maybe also poverty. Right? Now, in the history of urbanism, we can see that the perspective of looking at Kampung is established are mostly decided or derived from the perspective of the city people. So there is urban trajectories or urban perspective in looking at Kampung, and we can trace it back to the colonial history, right? When cities in Java, for example, were built by our colonial governments at that time, then the desa or the kampungs that are there are sort of pushed into the margin or to the peripheries, and become informal settlement around the city that the colonial government built. So there is this sense that those outside the city are not modern. They live in a very unsanitary lifestyle, different from the people, mostly the European, that lived in it. So there is this sense that Kampung needs to be improved, to be regulated, because there might be some thugs there. There might be some unruly behavior there. Or Kampung needs, if it is a too much problem, too much, also a place for sickness or hazards. Yeah, if there are too many problems, then Kampung needs to be affected or gentrified to make it modern, to be made into part of the city. So that is this colonial modernity. Nowadays, we still inherit that kind of perspective. But sometimes there is a perspective also, okay, Kampung, we don't need to affect, we don't need to destroy them, but we can change them to look good, so that it can be commodified as a tourist area or a place where you can take selfies, for example, right? So if we look at Kampung in Southeast Asia, we can see in Chiang Mai, in Thailand, there is still kampungs, but in Chiang Mai, for example, we have one kampung, Ban Mei Kampung, which is become a community-based tourism for private businesses to thrive there. If we go to Singapore, there might be you cannot find kampung as informal settlement like we have in Indonesia. If we go to Kampung Glam, for example, what we see is gentrified area with shops, etc., but only with nostalgic reference to the kampung past. In Indonesia, in 2014, our governor, then Jokowi, launched a program to make kampung look better. So he has this 100 thematic kampungs program. And the project was inspired similar project nationwide. But it seems like it is more top down, it's more instant and superficial. Each kampung should choose a theme and then try to change or to create an environment to live up that theme. And sometimes the theme can be quite superficial, different from what the real character or the daily life of the kampung. For example, we know about Kampung Kelir or kampung with a lot of colors, where people come and do some selfies there. So there is a connection with probably paint company as a sponsor, and they will give us a lot of paint, and they paint colorful, rainbow color Kampung, right? But this this doesn't really actually create a it's not connect to the real life of the Kampung people. In rural area, um, we see a different picture. A lot of investment is on infrastructure and also extractive industries. What happened is there is a lot of loss of agricultural fields and environmental degradation, loss of forests. For example, in Kalimantan, most of the forests are gone. And because the urban centers are so attractive and supplies a lot of job vacancies, there is human resource depletion in the villages as young people move to urban centers to find work or jobs in the cities. And urbanism also came to the villages, to the remote rural area with transactional mentality. You know, people started to be more individualistic, and there is no more gotong royong, something like that, occurring as people think about their own interests, right? And there are many kampungs with left behind children as their parents move to find jobs in the city, and they leave their children in kampung to be taken care by grandparents. So there are many school dropouts. There are many also social gaps, poverty, right? So the developmental framework that is going on up to recent time actually does not solve kampung issues, but in fact create more problems, right? So kampung residents or villages serve as objects of urban planning or urban or rural development, not subjects. Now, this is the thing that uh, become the environment of the commoning. So the first condition of commoning is the erasure or the threat of urbanism that marginalizes kampung or rural area in such a way that it might completely affect the whole kampung, gentrify the whole area, and the population of kampung people would have to move somewhere else because their kampung has already been sold or bought by the investors, and they can no longer live there. This is a story of Kampung Cempluk, right? Cempluk means kerosene, lamp. A long time ago, this kampung was located outside the city of Malang, and it has no electricity. So people use kerosene lamp as a lighting. Cempluk is called Cempluk. So this rural village is now already part of the city. Why? Because the city is moved to and expanded to include them within that the expansion, right? So they are surrounded by gentrified urban middle class environment. Now they are under the threat of being evicted. Why? Because their land becomes more and more expensive now. And many people wanted to buy the land because it's already now in the middle of all this middle class, upper middle class environment with very with schools, universities, and also many urban amenities. So a lot of people wants to buy the land, and so this kampung community, they are very susceptible to be affected, right? But they have a wish to stay there because they already feel that they now can live better because they can work as, you know, they can open some warungs and or work there in a middle class environment. They still want to live there. How can they stay there as a unit? if people come and then if one or two or three or four or five and more of them sell their houses, then it will eventually it will be gone. So in order to save their neighborhood, they invent a cultural strategy together, which is to invent an annual cultural festival called Kampung Festival in 2009. They use kerosene lamp in order to remember the old time, right? So for 1 week or several days, they will not turn on the electricity. They will use cemplo, and they will come out and they they come out with their own. They share traditional snacks from family recipes. They do cultural activities together. They sing, they dance, they have them, they make themselves happy, right? But eventually, this festival, although known only locally, started to be known elsewhere. Why? Because some people there in the kampung has connection or network with other people living outside. And the initiator of this Kampung Cemplo Festival, some are the RTs, airways, but also some are artists, singers, composer, musicians. And when they are making this festival, they invite their friends from other parts of the city, their colleagues from the universities, other people to come and join the festival. And this festival started to be known. And then it becomes a kind of initial, it becomes a kind of branding, a kampung branding, right? And it from this festival, then this network, digital network through WhatsApp, from one activist of kampung activist of Cemplo to others, become the initial digital networking of a network that is now called Jaringan Kampung Nusantara, Nusantara Kampung Network. It started from one festival and it grows, it grows, it grows. Now there is about 100 villages in East Java, West Java, some in Kalimantan, some in the region in Eastern Indonesia. They're connected with this digital network. So that is a connection of threat, that urbanism, the threat of that is the first condition that necessitates a cultural commoning to collect all cultural resources, to do something to save the kampung. The second one is poverty, right? This is a story of Karangreneng village in Magelang, right? 40% of the household are widows, aging widows. Many of them are farm workers, melinjo, nut grinder, which and they get an income less than $100 a month. At that time, when they were about 10 years ago, there was urban consumption. People, children, eat the urban instant food. There is very low social cohesion. And they didn't receive any village funds, anything. The village has no natural cultural attraction whatsoever. But there is one villager that was inspired by a TV program called If I Were a farmer, if I were fire engine officer, etc. And he got this idea and he started to create a live-in project for Jakarta youth to experience rural living. But he didn't do it alone. He has this idea. He created a design. And then he started lobbying some of the kampung people to support his idea. 1, 2 people, 3 people. Finally, he got a dozen of people working for him. And after that, these dozens of people started to organize villagers. And they started to experiment with themselves. If the city people come to their village, what would they do? they need to do something. What is it? What do they have culturally? They started to recall their games, traditional games, their art, their traditional art. They try to identify who can teach what. Oh, that person can teach a gamelan. That person can do something. They start sharing cultural resources, and they experiment with this live-in project. So after they are successful in that first project, they started to organize how to share the income, to build a common space for villagers to practice their traditional art. They built a space and a small arena with roofs for children to practice. So this is the finally it started from there. It continued up until the crisis, right? All right. So condition of poverty and marginalization initiate this commoning, and it became quite successful because people who used to be not caring for one another now started to think collectively. Another example is condition number 3, impacts of global migration. As I mentioned earlier, many kampungs are depleted of human resources. An example is Desa Ledok Ombo in Jember. Most of the adults went outside before, long time ago, about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They went abroad and they left their children to be taken care of by the elders. And the children are dropouts, they becomes unruly, they're really uncared for. So there are 2 activists coming from Jakarta, returning to stay there as their parents are there. And they started this group, small community of a kind of library for children, where they put up some books and ask the children to come and read with them. And they started to reawaken the interest in children traditional game, which is egrang. They teach it, they re-teach the children, because the children already completely forgot this this game. They play with gadgets. They don't care about traditional game. They started to teach them again egrang, with different kind of experimentation, right? With they get egrang that can dance, egrang can even dance barongsai, all sorts of experiment. Finally, these children are very excited, and they started this community with the name of Tanoker, a Maduris language, which means cocoon. Why they choose Maduris? Because Madura, the language, the Maduris language, have been unpopular in their own village. There are many Maduris people. The children did not want to study the language or to be associated with the language, because they think that the language is sort of a kampungan, or not like Indonesian, not like English. It's not very now kind of thing. But then they reverted. This language is important. This language is part of our identity. It's not kampungan. Kampung is good. Kampung is something, our kampung. We are proud of our kampung. So there is this kind of a reverse mentality to appreciate local resources and local languages. Now this year is the 11th anniversary of the Egrang International Festival in Tanoker. The children who played this Egrang has been sent to other countries, and they won several awards. So this again is the condition of the commoning, condition when they are forced to think, to find something, to reverse the impact of global migration. They hope that when the kampung is alive again, people do not need to migrate. They can stay in the village. They can make the village alive. So this kampung commoning, most of them use rice barn. In Europe, it's called hayloft. Here is rice barn or lumbung as a symbol of collective resources, right? Um, there are many terms for it in so many languages in Indonesia. Leit in Sundanese, Lumbuang in Minang, Baradang in Simalungun, Batak Nilas. People have the memory of Lumbung. They reactivate this memory and put this as a symbol. It is used by Japong Nusantara. It's used by many communities all over Indonesia to symbolize togetherness, reactivation of the culture of Kampung, collective culture of Kampung. Now, in Japong Nusantara, at least, we can see their act of commoning in several ways. First, the symbol of lumbung, not of agricultural crops, but as a collective rebuilding of common cultural resources. Second, they create a gotong royong, festive gotong royong, meaning they create festivals, they create events that make that makes the kampung people enjoy some kind of activity together for fun, right? It's with dance, music, food, and they have this practice of sonjo kampung, visiting one kampung visiting other kampung to share their experience of collective togetherness. This is the concepts that are being used by this network called Kampung Nusantara, Jaringan Kampung Nusantara. And in other cases, there are also other networks. If you see a WhatsApp group now, many kampung have their own WhatsApp group. They have networks between their own kampung. For example, Jaringan Kampung Bekasi now have its own network to discuss issues and problems in Bekasi, mostly about pollution, the river, and the expansion of the industries to completely pollute the environment and change their lifestyle, etc., etc. So these kampungs have different kind of network now using digital and social media. If you see, there is a digital mediated interaction and also connection between rural and urban kampung. Because as we know, every year there is always people mudik coming, going back and forth, right? So there's always also a connection between kampung and village here. And the digital network actually collaborate, or there is a transdisciplinary interaction between the kampung activists, with universities, with NGOs, also state and local governments. And sometimes they also make use of the private sources for sponsorship or for using their CSR to do something to get for kampung activity. So there is this kind of digitally mediated interaction in this kampung commoning, right? Of course, it is not always a happy ending. There is not always a success story. There are many problems, right? So going back to the issue of open space and privatization, there are some experiments by some kampung to save their environment, for example, from industrial extraction, from being mined. There is a mountain that is going to be taken over by a company to be used as a sand mining or or gold mining or whatever. So the hill will be gone. It will be turned into a mine, right? The Kampong people want to save that hill, right? So they try to do something. How to do? It started with ecological concern, and then they try to save the hill, and they make a project of making the hill as, for example, a tourist attraction, mountain climbing center, for example. But now the problem is, going back to Olstrom, how is the open space managed? What is the governance of the common space, the open space? If it is privatized, then it is the same again. And some kampung decided to privatize it. one kampung leaders, you know, and they enclosed it again, privatized by the village elites, excluding residents from other neighborhood. They charge entrance fee. So it's again, it becomes another privatized thing. Although they managed to save some hill, that's fine. But then it creates conflict between village with neighbors, neighboring residents, and there is lack of participation because everything is done by the managers and the investors, etc. And so it's the story is repeated again. It goes back to privatization. So this is always a problem, and it's not easy to live within uh, the neoliberal structure of capitalism. We cannot go outside it. They have to live within it. But how to negotiate between all these interests? It's not easy. Now, I will talk about the moments of articulating of this company. There are many moments that support, complicate this articulation of Kampung community. Moment number one is the attention by the Jokowi government towards village. From 2014, the Jokowi government already established what is called village fund. So the village can really manage their own fund, and it's quite a lot. The fund increased up to 2 billion rupiah, starting from just 750,000 million up to finally 2 billion to be managed by the village. So there is attention to rural development, although the perspective is still urban, it's still development, but there is already attention. That is the moment, the first moment. And then there is also what is called Undang-Undang Desa in 2014. So this again give a new impetus, a new life to desa, because desa have their own undang-undang. They can regulate, they can manage their own desa, right? The second moment is cultural revitalization movement initiated by Department Kebudayaan, especially the Directorate General of Culture. And they managed in 2017 issued undang-undang about tentang pemajuan kebudayaan. So this is cultural support to culture, how to revitalize, how to support culture, right? So this movement actually is still going on up to now. In 2020, for example, this year, there is revival of local languages and culture. There is a week of cultural festival, 1 week of cultural festival, Sundanese, a West Javanese cultural festival, Javanese cultural festival, all over the Indonesia. There will be cultural festivals. And now we see the popularity of short film in local languages, such as the film Tilik that went viral, for example. So local languages started to be heard again and to be alive. And that is the third moment, which is actually a great problem. That is the moment of global crisis. It's a great crisis, but at the same time, it can serve as a turning point to a new kind of rural lifestyle or rural life. It is a moment when global capitalism face its crisis. There is a crash of local global supply chain. The transnational traffic is on hold. Development cannot continue because there is a budget drain. Urban consumption is affected. Everything, shops and all this urban consumption, malls, also living, residential apartments, all this is halted now. They have an economic crisis going on together with the pandemic, right? And this has been warned by a lot of people. This is the way that the nature protests the expansion of global capitalism that exceeds the carrying capacity of the earth, right? There is global warming, there's ecological destruction. Many writers have written it a long time ago, 2 decades ago even, but we never listened to them, right? Now, there is a talk of returning to new normal. What kind of normal? There is no normalcy before. The life before the pandemic is not normal. It's not a good life for the earth, right? So there's the talk about adjustment, adaptation. Are we going back to the old world plus health protocol? Are we continuing our journey towards the destruction of the earth and humanity, right? Um, the village and Kampung has already experienced. They become most vulnerable communities, right? Um, so this pandemics make, is a wake up call for a lot of people. It started from the upper middle class clusters in urban center. It might spread to the periphery, to urban kampung, to rural village, going back again with the cycle of migration to the cities. It will go back again. The cycle will continue. Of course, rural areas are less polluted. There is more open space, healthier living environment. But they also lack health facilities. They also lack support system if the pandemics went to them, right? And the urban kampung are more susceptible because they're crowded with limited space, sprawling between these modern residential shopping centers. So they have minimal health facilities, minimal support. And there is a imbalanced power between the city and the urban and the rural. So there is a lot of gap, social gap. The economic impact to rural area is loss of income, of agricultural products cannot be distributed to the city. International agents, national agents stop buying from them because supermarkets stop, and etc. And urban kampung dwellers lost their job as manual workers in many industrial areas because factories are closing, jobs are being cut. And then there is a return migration from the cities or foreign countries to rural areas where they are not ready for it. Many people came without jobs, without money. So what are they going to do, right? And now there are many villages that already developed themselves as tourist area. They're depending on tourism to get their money. Without tourism, what should they do? They experience loss of income. So, and also, both urban kampung and rural villages, their lack of food resilience. Um, there are many, this pandemic necessitates a common initiative. Otherwise, they will die, right? During the pandemics, they rely that we are all in it together. One person's malady is our tragedy, One person got the virus, all of us will have problem. So there is this wake up call to do something collective, right? There are many initiatives in urban kampung area to create food sufficiency. How to provide food if they have no land, no place, because they have crowded housing. There is no land to plant, so they have budidaya lele. They how to grow plants and to also to grow fish in a small a small, for example, plastic container, etc. In the bucket, fish and plant in the bucket. They do what's called urban farming, and they don't have space to talk to come together. They cannot come together. They cannot create crowded environment. So they have digital chat room for curhat, right? And they have they practice again what is called in Java. There is this tradition of chipping rice, a cup of rice. You give each household give a cup of rice to the kampung, and it will be collected in case of emergency that they have a supply. So every day just one cup. But in 1 week there will be a lot of rice collected. In times of an emergency, they can distribute this. So this is a kind of lumbung, this kind of a lumbung initiative even in urban area. In this during the pandemic, from June to August, we also see how villages seize the moment. They create a village cultural congress from June to August to 2020. So it's the organizer is just one village, but with the support, transdisciplinary support from academicians, scholars, cultural workers, private organization, governments. They all come to support this village cultural congress. And they have 1 month survey. They conduct 1 month survey of villagers' expectation during the pandemics, 1 month of webinars, daily webinars on new rural reconstruction after the pandemics. They have online cultural festival all over Indonesia with the Kampung Adat, indigenous community, traditional communities all over Indonesia. And then they produce 21 books, proceedings of these webinars on all sorts of issues, of kampung issues, like how to create food sovereignty, to create a health facility, education for all, it's all those things. So this is still ongoing process. It's not easy. We cannot imagine that after the pandemic, suddenly the world is changed. No, it's not possible. We are still within the capitalist system. We cannot transform it totally. But there are many legislations, many struggles to keep the collectives alive. For example, there is this efforts in issuing legislation, like village cultural law is now in process with the concept of resource sharing for the village, cultural resource sharing. And then there is indigenous community law that is still being, people work on it. There are a lot of problems because there is resistance by the industry, by the legislators, because this might create problem with investment. Why? Because the indigenous community have rights to access to the open space, their land, the community, indigenous community land. But that will have problem as the investor privatization comes. So it's again privatization and commoning. This is still a problem, right? That is conflicting. And there are many individual village and kampung initiatives all over Indonesia, transdisciplinary collaboration to enhance village resilience and commoning. For example, how to make basic needs, how basic needs should not be privatized, right? But managed collectively for common good. How about health facilities? How about food sufficiency? How about education, right? How to create food storage for emergency, food security? How to promote it in such a way that each individual household in kampung has their own lumbung, personal lumbung, and then at the village level they have it, right? How to manage collective urban farming for food sufficiency, or even more than that, how they manage it so that they can live on it and also probably contribute it to the market, right? How to establish free, community-based, environmentally based schools. There are many now experiments in Bekasi. There is Sekolah Alam. supported by a lot of people, they can create a school for 150 students for free, and the school does not have any building, but the whole kampung, the garden, you know, the village, the river, they are the places where students can learn, right? And hopefully this can be supported by the Campus Merdeka systems, as students can do internship in Kampung to earn credit. So this can be a place for transdisciplinary work. How to build environmentally friendly collective initiatives such as waste and garbage banks. There's already initiated in many kampungs. Collective composting by the urban RT, kampungs. Or how to enhance farmers' readiness towards global farming impacts, right? In UI, we have what is called Warung Ilmiah UI, initiated by Professor Yunita Winarto, an anthropologist, working together with farmers to really produce knowledge together. Now, also for example, to measure rainwater, they work with agrometeorologists, and so it's transdisciplinary. Also, how to create alternative rural-urban distribution. You know, before they are so dependent on or big distributors. Now there are many chain systems, you know, to interact through digital networking and to create supply directly from the farmers to the consumers in such a way that give benefits more to the farmers. How to turn local knowledge and culture, herbal medicine, organic food, alternative healing into resources for living. They can share their knowledge and they can help urban dwellers to also to get benefits from it, to learn. The village becomes the center for knowledge, right? Well, as a conclusion, the pandemic has shown that neoliberal structures is not sustainable. Has global capitalism has rendered urban kampung and rural village vulnerable. It has caused depletion of land, turning farmers into service labor, repressing local agency, creating competitive, transactional mentality, create conflicts, competition, divisive enclosures. Now, starting in 2010 up to the pandemics, Indonesia saw kampung and village movement to create cultural commons and to do commoning, to create open, inclusive, participative, and festive togetherness, utilizing local cultural resources to be relearned, shared, in order to live within the global capitalist system or to set alternative way of life. There are many traps and complexity, tricky negotiation between state and capital. There are many democratic apparatuses that are hijacked by political elites, right? But these efforts of rural commoning is now enhanced by the pandemics, actually not halted, but actually renewed, because the energy is sort of renewed. The urgency is sort of strengthened. But of course, we have to acknowledge it remains patchy, still not systemic enough to transform the neoliberal structure, right? We cannot do it in one go. But the vision and spirit is there. And we realize now that life before the pandemic is not healthy. And in order to create a different world, we need to all of us work together.